Don't allow them the mic option.
That's sticky. Open the mouth. Savers not on it. Yeah, after they do that.
So sweet of you, Krista.
The AI generated content is hilarious because it just said you're not sticky and open my Outlook. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So, for those of you who don't know who this is Tasha Petterson from Investigations. And so I'll let her tell you how long she's been with the department and what capacities and things like that. So,
Hello. Like she said, I'm Tasha. I work with Investigations. I've been with Investigations almost 7 years. That's where I started and where I'm going to stay because I love investigations.
And you're so good at it.
I like investigations. But told to come and talk about what we do, a little bit of background on how we get cases and what happens in those cases. So anybody can report a case. Everybody's aware of that. When it comes in through the statewide intake, and statewide intake figures out if that case is a P1, which is priority one, which means the department has 24 hours to make contact. A P2 means we have 72 hours to make contact, and an AR case, it's an alternative response case. They have 120 hours to make contact on a case. AR is more, they come together, we talk about the problems together. They call and tell the family ahead of time. They call and schedule the appointment. I do not do AR. I just do P1s and P2s. But P1s and P2s, we make contact with the kids first. That's our priority, is to make sure these kids are safe. We see the kids at school, wherever the kids are. If the kids are younger, we go to the daycare. We do not have to have the parents' permission when we first get a case. Like I said, our priorities are the kids. So we go straight to where the kids are. And from there, we talk to, if we're out of school, we try to talk to the school to see kind of like the background of these kids. If there's any concerns we need to address while we're involved. And then we go make contact either with siblings or the rest of the family at their house, their jobs, or wherever we need to go. We prefer not to go to their jobs though. And then that's where we determine whatever the allegations are. We have to figure out what's true and what's not true. If it's drug use, obviously the only way to know if somebody's using drugs is a drug test, or we send kids to the hospitals or doctors to get checked out as well, because we're not medical professionals. And then from there, we staff it with our supervisor. We determine if the case needs a safety plan, or if the family isn't able to come up with a safe plan. And that safe plan could be anything. Somebody supervising them, kicking somebody out of the home, kids going to a different home. It could be any option. Sometimes families don't have that options or those options. And so that's when the department decides to, we have to staff it, but then we do the emergency removals. With the emergency removals, I brought some paperwork with those. Obviously, that's when CASA gets involved, is with our removals. We have the notice of removal that we go over with the parents, telling them why we're removing and letting them know. Like, it has our information or the investigator's information on it, and then they sign, or they don't have to sign it. It doesn't stop us from removing. We don't have to have a court order to remove. This is in place until we can get a judge's order in place. And then that's how the process all starts. We have the temporary visitation form. Anytime we do a removal, the child gets a visit with their parents within the first 5 days. Investigations is responsible for that. They usually will notify CASA. CASA's pretty good about letting us know who's going to be on it, so we can get them to the visits as well. And then they have a child caregiver resource form. This is probably the most important form. It just goes over like where you would want your child placed at. And they have a couple options to put on there that we ask for phone numbers and addresses and things like that, so we can obviously locate these people. And then we ask the children too where they want to go. If the kids can talk, that's a big factor on where it's their life being uprooted. So I always ask my kiddos where they want to go. And even on this form, it shows like where we ask the kids and what the kids say. And it doesn't have to be relatives. It doesn't have to be, it could be somebody the kid considers family. We place wherever, and we can turn it into a fictive kid placement. So I want to look at these forms.
So what do you look at when you determine where you're going to place that once you have this list of names?
So we ask questions. We have to make sure, like when we call and talk to the possible placement, we have to make sure that they have no criminal history, no CPS history, and if they have any knowledge of what's been going on and what got the department involved. Because if they've known about stuff that's been going on, we can't say that they're a safe option when they didn't do anything to protect these kids. And obviously our job is to make sure these kids are safe, and we don't want to put them in another environment where they're going to possibly get removed from again. So we ask a ton of questions. We have to make sure that their home is safe too, that visitors at their home are okay to come over, that they have childcare, financially be able to support these kids. Taking in kids it's a lot of money. Groceries for one is a lot. So, and some kids need daycare or diapers or whatever, and it gets expensive and adds up. So we have to do all those backgrounds as well, make sure that they don't have CPS history, and if they do, if they have any RTBs, which is found reason to believe on our end, we can't place a child there. We have to look at the next options.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I used to work in education. I had parents send a letter saying their kids could not be interviewed by CPS unless they were present. How do you all handle that?
The department still interviews those children, and we'll let the school know, like we're heading to the house now, because regardless on if a parent sends that letter, the department still has a job to do to make sure those kids are safe. And so we still have to interview those kids. And then we handle the part with the parents. Obviously they get frustrated at the school for allowing it, but all in all, it's the schools and the department's responsibility to make sure those kids are safe. So we continue on.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are y'all being invited into the police departments in the county to do this training too? You know, with them or with the sheriff's department or anybody?
Not to my knowledge, no, ma'am.
I sure wish you would.
Absolutely.
Oh, if only I did. I was gonna say, I would absolutely suggest that, you know, they all.
Absolutely.
Nothing to do with you guys.
Those Barnes on the CPS board,
Yeah.
really.
I said so they can understand
Yes.
what y'all are looking at there.
And the schools too, because we have, obviously when we go out, we talk to the kids one-on-one, and sometimes schools will interview the child before we get there. And we don't prefer that. Obviously our job is to make sure these kids are safe. We evaluate all that. And so we do ask that the schools don't like investigate their own.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've worked in the front office of an elementary school, and we didn't even know that CPS was coming. It was Johnson County. But they usually wouldn't call in advance. They just show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we
And
typically
that's
do.
probably why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it was in Ellis County too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we show up unannounced a lot of the time. Sometimes we'll call and make sure the kids are there, but that would be the only thing. Or if they have like a weird schedule or leave early or come in early, like pre-K kids, sometimes we'll call them, know we're coming. But in Hill County, we have a lot of the schools that cooperate with us, and don't have any issues with like leaking it or letting anybody know that we're coming or anything.
Yeah.
So what constitutes like a P1 or a P2 or an AR? Like, what are some things that would?
A P1 would be like, if a child made an outcry of sexual abuse and that perpetrator is still in the house today. For domestic violence occurring in the house right now. P1s are, can be immediate assist as well, where law enforcement calls us to wherever they're at, and we have to go ASAP. But they're the only ones that can constitute an immediate assist. But, and then a P2 would be like if a domestic violence incident occurred over the weekend and law enforcement took the dad or the aggressor to jail. And, so then that would mean that the kids were safe for the moment. And so it would mark it as a P2. Alternative response, are for children over the age of 6 and, not for any young child, because obviously we can't interview young kiddos or babies. So AR only deals with kids that are 6 and older. And those cases, they typically deal with a lot. I mean, they can get anything too. Domestic violence, they don't work sexual abuse, so things like that.
Question, who would be qualified at the school to even conduct an interview unless they made the call?
Nobody.
School counselor will
Yeah.
try to jump in and do it.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm like, they shouldn't be, should they?
No, ma'am, they should not.
Unless they actually received the outcry.
Correct.
Then
And
they could do it.
we've been working with a lot of the schools because we did have some schools that the counselors were doing that, and we were getting a bunch of cases, and it was like, oh, we already talked to this child. I'm like, well, that's not your role.
Trained.
Right. And so we
You'd also
did.
Be fearful if they're not trained in forensic, they're doing like in bias.
Right.
The answer.
Right. And we've been accused after that's happened, where like the school has and did their little investigation, then they called us, we go out, and then the parents accuse us of coaching their children. And that absolutely does not happen.
Yeah.
So we had talked to that school, the particular school here in Hill County, and we told them what our concerns were, and we haven't had an issue since. So they usually address it pretty quickly.
What about interviewing kids with special needs?
What do you mean? Like,
Because so I had an investigator came one time to the school to interview a nonverbal, severe and profound student. And she got nowhere. So what should you do in that case, or what?
so if we have kids that are nonverbal, and if they go to a public school, I try to talk to, or investigators should try to talk to everybody who's around that child, like the teacher who's one-on-one with that child, the principal, the counselor, the nurse, whoever deals with this child, like on a daily basis. Because if this kid's nonverbal, we still have to see the kid from head to toe to make sure. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Oh, no, I was just making sure
Um,
that nobody had said anything.
Yeah.
in there.
So we try not to, like, we have somebody in the room, like if there's physical abuse, we make sure like we look at the kids from head to toe. We just have to have like a witness in there. But we talk to the professionals that deal with that child. If a child's nonverbal, we can't make them verbal, but we can make sure that they're still safe. So, and we talk to medical professionals too on those cases. Oh, I know in our area we do. Like if that kiddo goes to a doctor regularly or gets medication, I know investigations, we talk to all those professionals.
So about how long is it from the time you get a P1 or a P2 until you either close out your case or there's a removal? What's that time frame?
So if it's a removal, it's pretty quickly. We've had cases where we've tried doing safety plans. I've sat on a case 4 or 5 hours trying to come up with a safety plan with people. And when it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And then we make the determination then, because if you leave a house, you're saying that the child's safe. So us staying there and making sure like we're trying to come up with a safety plan. So if we end up removing, those cases close usually after the adversary hearing. And then the cases, like if we work them and they have a safety plan or they don't have a safety plan, we usually still try to close those cases within 30 to 45 days. We're not involved very long. We're involved a short period because it's an investigation. And so in that time frame, we're calling references, calling people who are around these children, collaterals, professional collaterals or regular collaterals, people who are seeing these children regularly. We don't want to talk to a grandma who's out of state and hasn't seen these kids in 6 years. Like that's not beneficial to us.
And so you're talking about safety plan. What can you give us an example of what a safety plan might be?
Like for domestic violence, we we possibly can kick the aggressor out, make them have supervised contact. If there's an emergency protective order, we basically mimic our safety plan off of the EPOs, the emergency protective orders, and make sure that the parent who isn't the aggressor follows it. That way the department can hold them accountable as well, because a lot of people don't follow those emergency protective orders, unfortunately. And people don't follow our safety plans. And when you sign a safety plan, on the back of the safety plan, it says that it's an agreement between the department and the participants, and we're not violating any court orders because the department can't violate any court orders. And that if the safety plan is broken at any time, then the department can remove that child or the children at that time, because that's an agreement that we're trying to make sure these kids are safe. And so they know going into that safety plan that that's a possibility that the children still could be removed, even if they sign a safety plan.
And what are the outcomes? Like, y'all could just close the case and leave the kid there. Obviously, you could remove or you refer to FBSS. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So if we can walk away from a case and say that those kids are safe, the parents are doing everything they need to do, or they have a good support system in place to where those people are going to hold the parents accountable for something, then the department can walk away knowing that if something happens, these people are going to call us, or they're going to intervene and keep those kids safe. So we can rule that case out, or RTB, whatever route that goes, we can close the case. If a family has ongoing history of like domestic violence, drug use, or whatever, and we are able to come up with a safety plan and they've never worked family-based safety services before, we can refer that case to family-based from FBSS. FBSS is a participation thing where the department works services with the family while the kids are in the home. Or there's a PCSP with the kids out of the home and they're working services too. It doesn't involve the courts unless the family isn't participating, then they can get a court order to make them participate. And then the conservatorship one is where we can't come up with a safe plan and there's an emergency to where we have to remove to keep the kids safe.
Statistics on how many that go through the FBSS that don't ever find themselves back in that. I hear everybody's not a fan.
We do have some cases that don't come back, but when FBSS goes to close a case, they do have recommendations on what to do with the case if we get another case, and if that family would be able to work services again. Like if they didn't participate, then they're going to say no, you need to go order for this next one, or if there is a next one. So I don't know. It just depends on the family if they actually learned and if that worker engaged and made sure that they were able to demonstrate what they learned. So it all just depends on that and the worker. Same with CVS.
So if you have to remove a kiddo, what happens next?
If we don't have any family options at that time or any options that are appropriate, we have a home in Waco called the Isaiah's Home. It's a faith-based thing. They created this home, which is fantastic for these children. We go there and stay there. They have beds for these kids to sleep in. They have this whole upstairs where the kids can go shopping and feel great. I've never had a kid go there and not feel good after they left. They're able to get clothes and get new shoes and toys, games, stuffed animals, everything upstairs. It is fantastic. So we stay there until we are able to get placement, and we just rotate. Sometimes the primary worker stays there until we get placement. Sometimes that's a couple of days. So we rotate out and figure out what the plan is.
And then once you find a placement, you're the one who actually takes them there and you do paperwork with the placement.
Yes, ma'am.
Set up the first visit and all that.
Yes, ma'am.
And so
Almost 7.
You're all over the place, aren't you?
You're always talking about chasing somebody, jumping over fences, taking out houses. Y'all better watch out.
Yeah. Yeah, she got her sneakers on.
Fence jumping.
We cover 3 areas. So we cover Hill, Bosque, and Hamilton. So
Oh, wow.
like Friday, I was in Hamilton till late at night. And I mean, when we're in Hill, primarily all of our cases are in Hill. Mhm.
So can you talk about the hearing that happens with the judge,
The ex parte?
the ex parte hearing?
After we have a removal, like I said, the notice of removal is in place until the department gets the orders from the judge. At the ex parte hearing, it happens within 24 hours. It's usually that next day, or sometimes we try to pick up with orders. And it's usually the investigator, the supervisor, and the judge. And we go in there and we tell the judge what the immediate dangers are. And we talk about the history and what the department did to try to prevent the removal, because our goal isn't to remove the children unless there's just no absolute plan. And so the judge decides then if the department has enough to move forward. And then that just gives us emergency custody until the adversary hearing. And then at the adversary hearing, the parents have the right to either fight the removal or agree to work services. And if they fight it, the judge can obviously listen to both sides and determine if the department has enough and if it's a continuing danger. And then the department would get temporary custody, and then that's when it goes to the conservatorship side.
So in a case where, say you feel a child is unsafe, but there's a grandmother or aunt, uncle that they could go live with, ends the case from, I mean, we don't see it, but it stays within CPS or potentially.
Yes, potentially FBSS. It just depends on the circumstances. If like we are able to do a safety plan and then those grandparents either take custody, because if this family, like if we've been dealing with them for case after case after case after case, and then these grandparents are like, no, I'm going to take custody, then the department lets them file their own, and we give them a timeline, like you need to file within 10 days.
Yeah.
And then they take custody and we go away. But then there's some instances where we do safety plans and I mean, we do FBSS. Like it's just the cases are different, just case by case. So yeah, there's cases that don't make it to the courts.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Interesting.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. I'm sitting here thinking, good Lord, how do you plan?
How many of
anything?
you are there for these 3 counties?
There's 6 of us total. So
No,
I got a lot
No.
around the-
That's
I
not
would
enough.
imagine so.
yeah, we have one worker who she lives close to Hamilton, so she covers a lot of our Hamilton cases. But she's not like the only, like I have cases out in Hamilton right now, and so do one of my other coworkers. But within all of us, we handle it all. So
Does the rating system really help y'all?
the what?
The rating system, the P1, the P2, you know, those kind of, does that really help y'all? Do y'all still chase down a lot of things that, you know,
Oh, we absolutely do.
that
Yeah.
still come to, you know?
There's some cases that come in as a P2 and you're like, how is this a P2? I don't know where their criteria is and how they rate the P1, P2s, because there's cases that come in and there's a small child. I'm like, we're going today.
Yeah.
And you can remove and have like 60 something hours still in your case to make contact, but that time just keeps continuing to tick down till it's a 0. But we know the kid's safe. So I don't know what their criteria is,
And
but
I was kind of asking, did you get to have any input on
No.
the criteria? You just get told and you.
yes, ma'am.
But you can use your judgment if you feel like you should
Absolutely.
go out sooner.
Yes, yes. And we'll staff it. Like if that kid's not at school that day, or if like, the schools are out for some odd reason, we'll staff it to see if we can hold it to the morning. As long as we have the time frame still, we can staff it to make sure we can see those kids at school, because a lot of the times the kids, especially in front of their parents. The parents, once we make contact with families, we have a notification of rights that we have to provide to the parents that say that they can refuse for the department to interview their children. Everybody has the right to that. If the department feels like those children are not safe or like something's going on or the parents are hiding something, we can obviously file something. We've done it before, especially if we felt like a child is being coached. So that's why we try to make contact at school, because they do have the right to stop those interviews or not allow us to see those children.
Written letters can't stop them, right? Because she was saying like how people would write letters and.
No,
Okay.
no, absolutely not. No.
The reason I visit my CASA kid at school sometimes.
Right.
Okay, just to make sure I
Right.
got to hear the whole story.
Right. Because a kid, they feel safe at school, and you can ask kids all the time where they feel safe at. And a lot of the times they say their teachers spend a lot of the times with these kids. And it's a great collateral for us to talk to these teachers. But it's also great for these kids to feel safe there. And I mean, we're not trying to take that from them, but if they feel safe there, we want to interview them there. In daycares.
Anybody else have a question?
Tell us about your interaction with CASA when you're working your cases. Because we're like, tell us.
Yeah, no, I love working with CASA. CASA, like when we do the ex parte hearing, after the judge signs it, he sends out that CASA is appointed. Usually we get the email from Sarah letting us know which CASA is involved, and we let CASA know when our visit is, because we want CASA there. Investigations loves CASA. We love working with CASA.
They all wore their CASA shirts on Go Blue Jays.
We did. We work well with CASA.
That was sweet.
Yeah, we have that. Yeah, we work well with CASA. And we like CASA on our cases because there's things that they see that we might not see, or when they go to the houses, I feel like it's important to have CASA involved. And for these kids, because we have these scary badges, and sometimes they're scared to talk to us and tell us things, but then they tell their CASA work or something. So it's absolutely important. And we appreciate what y'all do for these kiddos.
We appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Because I had lunch at a local ISD, okay, with a little girl. And the little girl sitting next to her is looking at me like this. And finally I said, I just trying to be friendly, to the other little girl. And she said, "Are you CPS?" Okay. She said, like, "Aw, no, I'm not." No, I'm not, but I know.
Yeah.
Okay, that little girl. And I'm like, she was late. Okay, and had a sour taste in her mouth.
It's because what they hear about from their parents. I mean, we help kids, regardless of what anybody wants to look at it. We help kids, and we don't want to remove if we don't have to, or if there's another option. So,
sorry, couldn't be like y'all that day.
You're good. Yeah, there's a lot of kids who know what CPS is, and when you ask them, they're like, "You just take kids." I'm like, "Oh, that's not what I do." Yeah, and we try to talk the kids through that too, because we have interviews with kids who are like, "I don't want to talk to you. You're CPS." I'm like, "Come on in here, kid." But usually kids, like, this is me all the time. So usually kids pretty open, and they just want to come talk to you because you seem super sweet and nice, and they're fine.
Yeah.
And they're not these mean people that show up.
What is y'all's interaction with law enforcement? Like either when the case is starting, or like if there's a forensic interview, what is y'all's involvement?
So a P1, physical abuse and sexual abuse, in our policy, it says we have to notify law enforcement before we make contact, because that's determined on if the department makes contact together with law enforcement, or if we go ahead and make contact without them. Usually we have the same detective in Hill County that works with us, or Hillsborough PD. The other smaller areas, we work with them, but we have to help to see who's going to go with us or not going to go with us. And so sometimes, most of the time, the department makes contact by ourselves. Sometimes they'll ask us not to interview about the sexual abuse stuff, and we'll do the forensic if they have like some evidence that something's going on. We get sexual abuse cases a lot, so not every child has to be forensically interviewed. It just depends on the circumstances and what's going on with it. And so from there, if a child makes contact or if a child makes an outcry while we're at the school, the department, we can do an emergency where the department can or law enforcement can come out and transport that child to the forensic interview. And we can do an emergency forensic, or we can figure out like how to get this kid up there. If there's a safe person in the house, sometimes we'll call that safe person and have them transport. It just depends on the circumstances. But most of the time, the department and law enforcement get up there ASAP with that child because we want to hear what's going on. Because then if you send a child home, then there's concerns that they might be coached or they changed their outcry, they recant, they do a lot of things. And so with the forensic interviews we work with law enforcement on those. They set them, they're supposed to set them up, but we set them up here in Hill County most of the time. And then if they need a SANE exam afterwards or a medical exam, they go to that afterwards pretty quickly. And that's Dr. Battle in Waco. She's pretty well with working with us, and she does the medical part of that exam. You gather what I'm talking about, but and she does those exams, and then she also talks to that child, and her report comes back to us. And so during like while she's talking to that child, if the child they talk about like the outcry and like why the kid's there, and then it goes consistently with what she told in the forensic or she in the forensic, and so it just all comes together to make sure that kid's okay and that person's in jail.
What's the timetable of forensic, like for you to get the reports back from the forensic?
For the medical?
From the medical.
The forensics were always, the forensic interviews were always sitting in that as long as law enforcement notifies us about them, we're there. And if with the medical, it usually takes maybe 3 to 5 days to get back. If that, she's usually pretty quick on those. And if she's not, then she's calling you and telling you what that child said and what her concerns are, or what her recommendations are. And then she'll let you know, like she'll have that report to you as soon as, yeah. Yeah, she's pretty quick. Our other areas, we try to send them to Dr. Battle too, because she's great. She's good with working with kids.
One of our advocates on the virtual asked, how do you tell if a child is being coached?
There's just certain things. It just depends. You really have to engage with that child to know if the child's being coached. If there's history, we read the history to see like what's going on in that case. If there's no history, it just depends. You just gotta watch their body language and how they are. Kiddos are pretty open, and sometimes like when you go to ask more follow-up questions, they're kids, they slip up and then they're like, and then they just kind of freeze, and you can just, and it's sad to see because they're told to lie to CPS or to lie to anybody at school, and they'll eventually tell you it, and it's sad. It's to have to tell your child to lie to somebody. It shouldn't happen, but it happens all the time. And we spend sometimes 45 minutes on these interviews with these kids, sometimes longer, just depending on how the kid is. Sometimes the kiddo just cannot wait to talk, and they just break down as soon as you start asking them like the safe word, like if you're safe, and they just break down. Sometimes you get through a whole interview and it takes till the end of the interview, and then you're like, so why would somebody tell me this? And then they just start crying. That's the hard part about the job.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's the hard part
Do
about
you
it.
ever cry on any of your cases?
There was only one case I've ever cried on, and it was in Bosque County, but that was Amber Alert case, and it was a hard case, and it still is. It was in 2021, and you when you go out on cases, you want it to always be like your best, like give it your all, interview everybody. And that's why I tell everybody I work with, like if people show up, I'm at their door, like asking who they are, and I'm that nosy person, because you have to be that nosy person for these kids. And something didn't sit right on that case, and I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on it. It was a Friday afternoon, and The victim kid on that case was in Cleburne and the two siblings were in Walnut Springs. And I had called Katie, my boss, and told her that they were trying to get me out of Walnut Springs, but I didn't know why. And I got woken up to those kids in an Amber Alert. But yeah. But when you do everything, and I can go back and I still play it through my head, but and I know I did, but it's just, and that particular case, it was just a lot of mistakes on some other folks' parts. And like when we go to a school to interview a child, if somebody random shows up at that school and or picks up those kids, don't release the kids. If you've never seen this person before, don't release the kids. But anyways, yeah, that case still bothers me. But when you walk away from a case, you know you did everything, or at least I do.
Any other questions? No, I was gonna say thanks. I've had the privilege of working with you. And I said I was gonna say thank you. I know y'all's job is hard. Very hard. And by the time we get to read it, all the other extra work has been done. And then I said, you know, a bunch of the shocking things that I've read and affidavits, I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, we
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you. The kids in our area go through a lot.
Yeah, that was that one question that,
Sorry.
yeah, I didn't either. I didn't see the tiny red dot next to the chat. Yeah. Well, that was convenient that the Teams app told you that. Yeah. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, then, you know, we can, if you want to talk about your case or whatever, we can sit around and talk about things like that, or you're free to go. I'm going to stop the recording. So if I can figure out how to do that.
Is that red? Is it
This red button?
maybe?
Nope.
Surely if you leave the meeting, it's.
Oh, look.
There it is.
Stop recording.